The House will come to order. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Winkler from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bill to be placed on the calendar for the day for Wednesday, April 27, 2022, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bill. House File Number 4300.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 3438. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3438, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to legacy, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill contains appropriations for the Outdoor Heritage Fund for 2023, as well as supplemental appropriations for 3 other funds in the Legacy Amendment and a couple extensions. Just to refresh your memory, in 2008, the voters of Minnesota approved overwhelmingly a 25-year tax on themselves to tax themselves 3/8 of 1%. And this money is to protect and to enhance our state's outdoor heritage, clean water, parks and trails, and cultural heritage for the state of Minnesota. Representative Albright, that looks good. That decision has continued to be a popular one, and the voters, like I said earlier, overwhelmingly approved this, and it still continues to be very popular. And they've been able to do amazing work on projects throughout the whole state and making it all better for all of us in the state of Minnesota. So to start off, most of our work this year has been taking a look at funds that we've received in the past and looking at that. But the Lions work effort is going to the Lessard's SAM's piece, the outdoor heritage part of the bill. 33% of the money goes to outdoor projects around the great state of Minnesota. And these projects are, there's about $159 million. It ends up, there's about 46 different projects. We have some members of our body that are Representative Heitzman. I don't see him this afternoon, but I'm sure he's close or nearby. And I saw him earlier. And he serves on there. And Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, they put this package together, and thank you for your work. They serve with, as elected officials, but they also serve with citizens. And these recommendations, there was, like I said, there's 46 different projects and $149 million. And these projects work to all over the state to enhance, to restore, and protect our lands. And these votes, this council decided, they've had many, many meetings. I don't know the exact number, but maybe someone else can add that at some point. But with the good work of the council, they dig deep and look at these and try to spread them all over the state of Minnesota. There is some land acquisition, which maybe we'll hear about from Representative Green later. But keep in mind that this land is for all of us. This is stuff that we all can get out and enjoy and treasure. A lot of it goes to organizations that have received money in the past and continue to do good work, such as like Pheasants Forever and a whole Conservation Minnesota. All sorts of different groups are receiving these money, and deer hunters and Ducks Unlimited, and doing good work with. There's quite a bit of volunteerism that goes into these as well, and all sorts of different funds that are merged together. These projects are picked and thoroughly vetted and selected. So I guess that's kind of all I'll say there, and maybe we can talk more later as we go. What we found, just as everybody knows, this is sales tax, and the sales tax receipts came in more robust, and Lessard Sams is able to respond to those numbers because they appropriate their funds annually. But in the other three areas, our funds, the clean water area and the parks and trails and the arts and cultural area, typically they do most of their work in the first year. But we thought it would be unfortunate if we were to leave this amount of money, these funds, on the bottom line. And we still have a robust reserve, over 6% or around 6% in each of these funds, but we're going to spend those out. And so in the area of the parks and trails, the money is going to go to each of the areas, to the Greater Minnesota folks that do great work, and to the Met Council in the Metro, obviously, and then to the DNR. So these funds some of them are matched. So and that's kind of what you'll see a theme throughout this whole bill is a lot of funds are matched and also matched up with a lot of volunteer work. So we're spending that. And also in the arts and cultural area, we're spending an additional $12 million. And we've spread that over the projects that have received last year, which we strongly went through the committee process, and we vetted them very thoroughly and continue to look at them to make sure that they're doing good work and out there making us proud. So to get into the other big part of the bill is the clean water area. And 33% of our funds, like I said earlier, well, I guess I didn't. 33% of the funds do go to the clean water, but we're spending the reserves. And that ends up being quite a chunk of money. It's $47 million. And so through our work with the Environment Committee of the Minnesota House and in our committee, we came up with some proposals. And there's some great work that's being done on some of these, the PFAS issues. And we're doing quite an effort on lead, trying to abate some of the problems. I mean, certainly we don't want our kids experiencing, or even us adults experiencing lead in their waters and whatnot, plastics and other things. So we're spending some of that money in these funds, but there's also some extensions that were needed. There's a couple of them in the Lessard Sams area, and so we're doing that. And then there's the Historical Society needed an extension, and I can't think of, there was one more, but I can't think of it right now. So I don't have a lot more to say at this point. I know we have some amendments, and so maybe we can have some discussion then, or some comments, however the speaker wants to handle this. Again, thank you, members. I was kind of expecting some clapping like you had yesterday for the governor, or sitting down or something, but no. Your hands are probably sore, especially on that side. Sorry. But not Sandra so much, huh? No. Again, thank you. You know, I feel really lucky. I have an amazing committee, you know, that we were able to do really good work, I really feel, on both sides of the aisle. It's such Minnesota's lucky to have this amendment out doing good work. And we're going to fight about the budgets and and we're lucky we have a surplus, but we're lucky to have this fund and able to do good work for the state of Minnesota. So thank you for your time, and ready for the amendments.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Green moves to amend House Bill number 3438, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A10.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A10 amendment is actually pretty simple. As we go through the bill, and I've gone through it many times every year, we always talk about our projects that are in these bills that are vetted. I challenge that. I don't think that they are. and also, we never get any updates on the finished projects. We don't know if they've worked out. We don't know what the final outcome was on a lot of them. And so what my amendment does, it actually, in fact, I'll just read the new language. The council must require an applicant for funding from the Outdoor Heritage Fund to submit a cost-benefit analysis of the proposed project as part of the process established under paragraph G. So what this will do is require everybody that comes in for clean water money, if they have a big project, and a lot of these projects are well into the millions of dollars, they would have to include in their plan the cost benefit that we're going to get from that project. So for instance, if you're going to spend $25 million on a project, on that total project, you want to make sure that you're going to get at minimum $25 million worth of benefit out of that project. And right now we're not doing that. I did get a report from a private entity through a college that did one of these, even though it wasn't required, and they used the same formula that is used right now by our federal government, because the federal government does require these in some cases. And what this will do is it will provide information not only to the legislature, but also to the Lessard-Sams Council, Clean Water Fund, whoever is getting these funds and doing these projects, that will allow us to see that and see in the end, are the taxpayers who voted for this getting their money's worth. So if you take a look at the amendment, you'll see that it's very simple, it's very doable, and it should be necessary. This is our obligation. We're here not only to make laws, but to see that the money that we spend is spent responsibly and not just tossed out into the wind and hope for the best. So there's the amendment. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a yes vote on it, and I'd ask for a roll call.
Representative Green requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Green. I've enjoyed serving with you on the committee, and you've not always seemed to enjoy it, but thank you. You've taken it very serious. And I know you mean well by this. I'm going to add that I just would ask members to consider voting this down. It's kind of an unnecessary burden. And it's, it's a little tricky to figure out how would you put a value on a trout or a pheasant. I don't know if you're, it's a little easy on some things. Like I have these articles, and they could figure out, like from Bowser, and they kind of figure out, how much phosphorus they're able to take out of the land. But then it gets a little trickier in some of these, like the side benefits. So how do you figure out the benefit of being able to fish, or being able to swim in this water, or to enjoy, what's a butterfly worth? So it's kind of, it gets to be tricky, and I guess at this point I would like members to consider voting this down, please.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate you looking into that, Chair Lillie, because most of the time people don't pay attention to this at all. So thank you for looking up what you did. However, you didn't go deep enough, because there is a pretty simple way to find the value in these. For instance, if you have a project and this project is going to make a duck pond, you can know from all the other places that we have around by migration, and that's in the studies that I have, how many ducks are going to be there. So if you're going to spend $25 million on a duck pond, and on average you have 6 ducks laying eggs there, probably there's better places for the money. So the argument that we can't figure out a value on this stuff is not really valid. And as far as unnecessary goes, I don't know what can be more necessary than making sure that the money that we spend is going for not only a good cause, but is going to have some kind of return on the investment. You're going to spend $25 million, which is not unheard of. You know, we see this stuff coming through our legislature, and they're asking for 6, 10, 12, sometimes more, but that's just a portion of that project. So if you look at that project and the millions upon millions that are spent on it, and you're not going to get any benefit for it, are we really that low on projects? Are we really that flush on money that we can just go ahead and say, well, we don't really need this because we just want this project and we don't care what it costs? I think this is a very, very reasonable amendment. I think that this is something that, like I said, the federal government does. They've decided it's worthwhile, and I think that we should follow suit. So I would ask for a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment? Representative Miller and Representative Munson's desk, you have the floor.
You're right, I just realized I did that. So thank you, members. I was wondering why you're looking at me funny. So I asked for support for, I think we all should support Representative Green's amendment. I actually would have liked to have seen an amendment that we do this on everything legacy. I was in the Legacy Committee my first term, and there's all sorts of things that we're sending money out to people, folks, that frankly we don't know if it's being used properly, improperly, if it's being used efficiently, effectively, as Representative Green's amendment. This is a subject that we've talked about this session. We're going to be pumping out millions, probably billions of dollars, and we always talk about how this is a great investment, this is a great investment, this is a great investment. We might even hear something along the lines of, for every dollar we put in, we get $5 back. That's a measurable thing, members. And I just think that accountability for the taxpayer dollars is not an unreasonable thing. I don't think that Representative Green is asking for anything too large. I think this is more than reasonable. And so I do ask you to support his amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment? The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I always neglect to say this, but you know, they really do look at projects. Lassard Sams, for example, they look back at these projects and they do assess them and find out to see if they're successful and if they're meeting. The year I served in, there was actually an organization that fell through. They were doing something that was questionable, and they ended up not getting money. And I don't know that they've gotten money again to this day. But this session, and Representative Green, I know you know this, we looked at every fund, almost every meeting we looked at something, and we dug deep to ask questions, to inquire how it's going. My only point is some of that's hard to measure. Like, we have swimming lessons in here, and for example, or maybe a visit to a library. But if someone, going back to the swimming lesson, so if someone gets a swimming lesson, what is that worth? It's worth a lot to that family. It might, they might enjoy Minnesota a lot more. They might not die. But some of that's hard to measure. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you're totally wrong. I think accountability and looking at these funds is certainly a valid thing. And so I don't think you're totally off the mark on that. But I think it is complicated. I guess that's my point, and that's why I'm asking members to consider voting this down at this time.
Further discussion to the amendment. The member from Crow Wing, Representative Heisman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would speak in support of the amendment. It's honestly quite, sorry, Representative Lillie. It's honestly quite shocking. You know, I remember not too many years ago when there was a lot of accusations made about deals being made in the dark of night and about how things came into the process. And this bill is quite honestly an example of that to some extent. $47 million in spending just showed up in this bill. Why? The Clean Water Council met this morning. I was there. 4 legislative members are appointed to serve there. I was the only one that was present today. I don't know why, not making any accusation, but I am at least able to tell you that I brought this issue to them this morning and said, what's the deal? You're the body that is there to decide how clean water money is spent. There's $47 million that just showed up in a bill that's going to be heard today. I'll let them speak for themselves if somebody wants to look it up and watch the exchange. Representative Green's language is simply suggesting that we have a cost benefit in place, an analysis to determine if we're getting our bang for our buck. Why do Democrats find that objectionable today? It seems like a no-brainer. Representative Green, good job trying to hold government accountable. I think it makes sense. I'm hoping that your amendment is successful today, Representative Green.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Green, the author of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I was done before, but if they want to keep going, I can go all day. I've got a big book here. So, Representative Lillie, you talked about vetting the bills in committee, and I will say I don't usually give accolades here, but you did allow me to ask my questions in committee, and I don't think we get that in the other committees. I appreciate that. I asked the questions. I can't say that I got the answers. All right, and I'm not going to go into it right now because we've got all afternoon to go through this bill, and I'll be getting into some of it later as far as where this money goes, what the qualifications are, and I can look through this book and I can show you time after time after time where they're going to buy, say, 800 acres for, however much, $5, $6 million, $7 million, and they don't even know where it's at. It gives you a list. It's going to be in some of these 87 counties. That's where we're going to take it from. You talked about leverage. We're going to talk about that a little later. In the legacy bill, you've got outdoor heritage fund leveraging clean water funds for projects. So legacy dollars are leveraging legacy dollars. Something's wrong there. But back to, we don't want to quite leave the point that we're on here, and that is simply requiring the people, when they're doing their plan, and everybody does a plan. If you don't do a plan, you might as well not come here. And it should be, when you're spending anywhere between $200,000, $400,000, $500,000 to put these plans together, and you're telling me it's just too much to say, let's do a cost-benefit analysis before we go further. These are tax dollars. These are coming out of people's pocket. And it's 3/8 of a percentage of a percent, whatever it is. And it doesn't sound like much, but at the end of the day, we're pushing $750 million every 2 years that is coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. Every single person in this state that pays property taxes is vested in this. And I also will just throw one more thing in here we're going to talk about later, because I hear this all the time about the legacy bill overwhelmingly passing. I believe it was like 56%, probably not exactly overwhelming, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, I just ask for a yes vote on this bill. It's common sense. It's not going to affect a great deal. What it does affect, if in a negative way, if it does affect anything in a negative way, that would be a good thing. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Would the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Bernardi.
Bernardi, no.
Bernardi, no. Christensen.
Christensen, nay.
Christensen, no. Davids.
David's aye.
David's aye. Elkins.
Elkins, no.
Elkins, no. Gomez. Gomez. Houseman.
Houseman, no.
Houseman, no. Mariani.
Mariani, no.
Mariani, no. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Morrison.
Morrison, no.
Morrison, no. Mortensen.
Mortensen, aye.
Mortensen, aye. Nelson, M. Nelson, M. Swazinski. Swazinski. Thompson. Thompson. Gomez. Gomez. Nelson M. Nelson M. Swazinski. Swazinski. Thompson. Thompson.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Green moves to amend House File Number 3438, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A9.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's try again. I want to read something to you that's in current law right now. In current law, it says, money appropriated from the Outdoor Heritage Fund shall not be spent to acquire property by eminent domain unless the owner requests that the owner's property be acquired by eminent domain. That's in law right now. I sent out some papers earlier, and I did take the names off of them because I didn't want people's names flashed all over, but you'll see that this particular entity has to do with watershed districts who are not elected, appointed people, and they couldn't make a deal with somebody on some land, so they passed a resolution, and they sent out letters actually to quite a few different landowners telling them that they were going to do an order of condemnation and take their land by eminent domain. When you talk to the watershed districts, and I know that they've contacted some people in this room and they've said, we don't ever do this, so this isn't necessary. But you've got the papers in front of you if you bothered to go get them. And this happens all the time. And the reason that you don't hear about it is because usually the landowner has nowhere to go, their back's against the wall, and they're going to lose it one way or another, so they try to negotiate for the best deal they can get, whether they want to do it or not. This falls back to the last amendment as well, where we talked about, are the projects they're doing even worthwhile? This particular project doesn't even come close. It's probably only gives back about a third of the money, according to what we've seen so far as the cost benefit for what they're going to spend on the project. However, it doesn't change the fact that right now we've got tax dollars paid by people, and that those tax dollars being used against landowners that have paid those same dollars, paid property taxes on this land for years because someone has a project and they want their property. And what they're doing here is they're saying, in this case and others, that we know we can't spend outdoor heritage funds on eminent domain, so we're going to set the outdoor heritage fund aside, do the eminent domain, and then use the outdoor heritage fund to turn around and do the project after we acquire the land by condemnation. And the question I have for the body is, do you like being used? Do you like being played for a fool? Because that's what they're doing. They're playing a shell game. You know, where is it at? Somebody, maybe a lawyer, I know there's a lot of lawyers on the other side, maybe they can help out here. They looked through this and said, we can get around this by dividing it up, pretending that it's not going to go into the whole project and just using the money afterwards. We should be angry and at the very least insulted. And I know I would hate to get one of these letters in the mail that says, by the way, you wouldn't sell us your property, so we're taking it. They also threaten with something called a quick take. Some of you might be familiar with that, some may not. But in that case, if they can't come to an agreement in time, they can go to a judge and they can get a quick take, which will allow them to seize the property and decide how much they're going to pay for it later. These things are going on. And so what I'm asking here today is very simple. We have in our law that was passed by this body years ago that says you can't use eminent domain if you're going to use these funds. They're doing it. All this is going to do is clarify that says we meant what we said when we passed this. So when someone stands up and say they're not using this, so it's not an issue, well, if they're not using it, then it's certainly not an issue. Let's just get out there and protect the people we're supposed to be looking out for. So I'd ask for a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Green. So it's my understanding that currently in law, they're unable to use eminent domain for Lessard Sam's projects. You've heard that in testimony in committee. I know you have apparently is this legal proceeding with the watershed, and I don't know the details. I typically try as a legislator not to get involved with current litigation, but it is against the law, and I know that is the intent from talking to the director of Lessard Sam's not to use it, and from the board chair of the Lessard Sam's and the others to not do this. That is not their will, but I don't know what maybe a local watershed might do related to something of the work they're doing. But I'm not saying you're wrong, but it is currently against the law, so I don't really think this is necessary. I'd like members to consider voting no, please.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, if the last amendment was a common sense, this one is a let's get her done. I mean, either it is taking place or it's not taking place, and if it's not taking place, this just makes the law that much clearer. So to me, it's really a no-brainer that we want to clarify extremely clearly that it's not to be done in any part of a project. So I would strongly encourage a green vote on the green amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I forget, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Representative Green requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Lillie, if I believed everything that you said, this amendment would still be of value. But the fact is that I know that on this project, and I've since heard from others, that in the particular project that I mentioned, in the one watershed, they're sitting on about $600,000 of outdoor heritage money. One of the reasons that they pushed the eminent domain is because this thing has been in play for, I believe it's 7 years. They can't get to the finish line on it, so they went with eminent domain before they lose the legacy funds. If that doesn't fit in here, I don't know what does. And so this is so common sense. I can't even believe that we would look at this and say, in our law right now, it states you can't use the money if you use eminent domain. They're getting around it, and we're not even willing to clarify what's going on. I'd like to say I'm shocked, but I'm not really shocked. But I am certainly disappointed. And I know that a whole lot of landowners, when they hear about this, are going to be disappointed as well. This is not something that should be going on where even the legislature looks at the current law that we have and says, we're just going to let that one go. It's in law, but let's let them get around it because they told us they didn't want to do it. So I would, again, would just ask, I want to beat it to death. I don't want to beat it to death, but I would ask you seriously consider voting yes on this. It just clarifies language that's already in law. And if they're not doing it, then this isn't going to hurt them anyway. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids.
David votes aye.
David's aye. Gomez.
Gomez, no.
Gomez, no. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Mortensen.
Mortensen, aye.
Mortensen, aye. Nelson, M. Nelson, M. Swazinski. Swazinski. Thompson.
Thompson, no.
Thompson, no. Nelson M. Nelson M. Swazinski. Swazinski.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3438.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd really like to zero in on Article 2 and de-jargon what these projects mean to you and your constituents and the water that we all drink. When I was trying to explain this bill to some of my friends or to my partner, what they mostly asked me was, I don't know what these words that are coming out of your mouth mean and what that actually means for my water. I think that's really emblematic of a lot of the bills that we pass and talk about in this body. And I think we too often admire problems or study them when we know there are actions we can actually take to make life better for Minnesotans. And Article 2 of House File 3438 looks at these water issues that we've been grappling with for years and takes actions to actually improve our water quality in every corner of our state. This bill invests big in PFAS monitoring. To remind the body, PFAS is a category of chemicals that adversely affects human health. It causes cancer, high cholesterol, liver damage, and much more. PFAS also does not occur naturally in our environment. These chemicals do not break down in our environment, and they remain present in our soil and water for so long that we call them forever chemicals for short. Passing this bill enables us to double down on monitoring PFAS along Lake Superior, in Washington County private wells, in the Battle Creek watershed, and in Pig's Eye Lake along the Mississippi River here in St. Paul. Representative Zhang has been a tireless advocate for his community in this area where they have struggled with a history of environmental racism. If you represent areas along the Mississippi River, like Representative Zhang or like I do, I encourage you to look at your water as well and think about where the water, what else is in the water that you're drinking. As many of you know, a personal passion of mine is addressing lead contamination in our drinking water. And members, no amount of exposure to lead is safe. Lead service lines are one of the largest sources of lead in Minnesota's drinking water. And often, and actually usually, these lead service lines are both publicly and privately owned. And we must replace both parts simultaneously to avoid increasing the lead concentration in drinking water. And in our legacy bill that we're debating right now, we allocate over $15 million to replace the privately owned portions of lead service lines while we're replacing the publicly owned portions of lines. And half of that money goes to the Met Council, and the other half goes to PFA to fund grants and projects across the state. This is a statewide issue. Lead service lines are present across Minnesota in all communities, urban, suburban, and rural. However, lead exposure through service lines is most common in lower income communities. These also bear a disproportionate amount of effects of other pollutants that we address in this bill and across the state of Minnesota. We also take steps to combat the growing micro and nanoplastics problem in our environment. Micro and nanoplastic particles are teeny tiny pieces of plastic which are less than 1/4 of an inch in size, usually about 5 millimeters in size. And these products and these particles, like PFAS, are not naturally occurring and are present not only in some of our remote landscapes on the planet, such as the boundary waters, but in human bodies as well. There have been numerous studies to show the impacts of microplastics on our environment, and we're currently evaluating their effects on our human health as well. We invest $5 million in developing tools to actually monitor and sample for these particles in our drinking water. And finally, members, I do want to remind us where this legacy money comes from. Minnesotans did vote to allocate this money from their sales taxes to make their lives happier and healthier. Minnesotans care about water. We're the land of 10,000 lakes. That's a cliche because we say it with pride so many times. We want swimmable, fishable, and drinkable water. We want water that's free of PFAS, lead, and plastic. So please vote green to protect and enhance every drop of water in this state. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I'd like to thank Representative Lillie for his hard work. I know he's very sincere in trying to do the best job that he can for Legacy and for this amendment every year. Not that I agree with everything this year. I do have I've got a question. Would Representative Lillie yield for a question, please?
He will yield, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Lillie, I noticed that there are, and Representative Jordan just pointed this out, over $15 million for dealing with lead pipes, $7.665 million for the Met Council. Where is that money to be spent?
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Erdahl, thank you for the question. It was a strong opinion and that we spend some of these monies that were sitting on the bottom line. It's time for us to kind of meet the time and to spend it. And so so the Met Council is going to develop a program that'll work on the lead service lines. And they'll also, which you're very familiar with, the PFA program, and they're going to administer the other half. We did $7.6 million in each program to kind of have some sort of geographic balance and parity and working through the established programs. And I know you're quite familiar with certainly the PFA and know the good work that they do, and we're expecting the same out of the Met Council.
Representative Erdahl.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lillie. I guess I want a little bit more direct answer to the question. The $7.6 million to the Met Council, where is that money to be spent?
Are you, Representative Erdahl, are you asking Representative Lillie if
Yes,
he will
I
yield
am.
to another
Thank you,
question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lillie, will you yield? He will yield. Representative Erdahl.
Okay, try that one again. The $7.6 million to the Met Council, where will that money be spent?
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Erdahl. I'd like to pass to my vice chair, Representative Jordan. She's kind of taken the lead on this, and I think she could give you a much better answer.
Okay, thank you, Representative Lillie. Will Representative Jordan yield?
She will yield, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Jordan, where will that money be spent?
The member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Erdahl, the money will be spent on replacing the privately held portions of lead service lines as the Met Council gives grants to cities that are also replacing the publicly held portion of the line.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Jordan, what you're saying is that the Met Council money is going to be spent in the area under the jurisdiction of the Met Council. Is that correct?
Representative Jordan.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Erdahl, that is correct.
Okay, thank you,
Representative
Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the other $7.6 million under the PFA, and I guess I'll go on with Representative Jordan. Would you yield, please?
She will yield. Thank you, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you. Representative Jordan, where will that $7.6 million be spent?
Representative Jordan.
That money will, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Representative Erdahl, that money will be spent in areas overseen by PFA as they are also giving out grants under their jurisdiction for replacement of lead service lines.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Jordan, thank you for that answer. My question is this then, could some of that PFA money also be spent in the Met Council area?
Representative Erdahl, you're asking her to yield again, correct?
Would you yield again, please?
Okay, she will yield. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Erdahl. I think that is the case, but a lot of that is overseen with the Drinking Water Revolving Fund, which is under PFA, and that will deal with some of the affordability aspects of it. I know when we were putting together this bill and talking to Representative Lillie and talking to Chair Hansen and talking to other members who are invested in this, the intention of this is to make sure that we have geographic parity with the replacement of lead service lines. As we've talked about in many committees this year, we know that lead service lines are a statewide issue, and this bill seeks to have a statewide solution to that problem.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Jordan. I guess I won't belabor this. I've been trying to make this point, and that is I agree totally that this is a statewide problem. I've got people in my area that have lead in their pipes as well. What I'm saying is that I fear that since money is available through the Met Council for lead pipe abatement, and the PFA isn't just Greater Minnesota. The PFA is also in the metropolitan area in terms of the revolving funds and the money that they distribute, that basically you can be double dipping in the metropolitan area for this money. And that's my concern, that it's not exactly equally fair, because in the Met Council served area, you have access both to the money designated for the Met Council, but also money that is designated for PFA. And that's a concern to me. But beyond that, generally I support legacy bills. If this were a bill basically with the outdoor heritage, and that was the main and nearly total purpose of the bill, I could certainly support it. I feel we've gone just a little bit farther afield this year than I'd like to see it. So looks like a no vote there, Representative Lillie. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to maybe follow up on Representative Erdahl's point, because of the affordability standards with the PFA, the metropolitan communities generally do not qualify because the median household income is higher. So when there are grant programs that go out, usually those metropolitan communities often are ineligible for PFA programs, often. Members, it's discouraging. It sounds like a lot of no votes for legacy. Kind of surprising. Here's something that Minnesotans voted for, has been passed, whether the Democrats have been in charge or whether Republicans have been in charge. I just want to follow up on a few of the appropriations that are in here that you're going to be voting no on then. $2 million to the Clean Water, from the Clean Water Fund to the Commissioner of Agriculture, not the PCA, not the Met Council, but the Commissioner of Agriculture, to monitor trout streams in southeastern Minnesota for the presence of neonicotinoids. Also, the Commissioner of Agriculture must monitor and test for microplastics and nanoplastics. Members, in the last 2 weeks, there have been published studies that state that we, as human beings, have microplastics in our lungs. Let me state that again. We have plastic in our lungs. We have microplastics in our blood. Now, a century ago, plastics were just starting to come into our world. A century later, they are ubiquitous. So much so, we don't even have a definition of microplastics, nanoplastics. We don't have a definition of plastic in statute 100 years later. So this bill actually defines plastic, microplastics, and nanoplastics, and then it uses the existing monitoring networks. And Representative Lillie, this has been 3 years of effort, 3 years of being vetted out here with the agencies in their existing monitoring networks to look in our water for plastics. I have yet to find one person who wants to be drinking plastic. I have yet to find one person who wants to be eating plastic. This bill does that analysis so we can finally get started looking for it, and to hopefully by looking for it and measuring it, then we can manage it. Representative Jordan mentioned the PFAS throughout this bill. Battle Creek, also looking downstream from Pig's Eye Lake. The things buried at the Pig's Eye dump are starting to leach out. And those of our communities that are below that, we need to look at it. We go and add to existing programs for lead sinkers and lead tackle, not creating something new, but enhancing it and expanding it. Peatlands. Recent reports, recent research shows that our peatlands are a great component looking at climate change. Carbon can be released as peatlands are brought into production. So we don't say we're going to require anything on peatlands. We're going to study peatlands, but we're also going to put money into an existing program, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, so that willing landowners, not taking, but willing landowners can enroll their land in that program to protect peatlands. That'll help out water quality, wildlife. I think Representative Jordan just had mentioned that we need to give peat a chance, apparently. Existing programs that bring in federal money. The CREP programs bring in those dollars, again, for willing landowners, not taking. That land still stays on the property tax rolls, still in private ownership, but it's protected for water quality, and that is an appropriate use of the fund. Finally, we provide $500,000 to the Conservation Corps of Minnesota, a great program involving young people in outdoor and environmental protection, improving water quality, including stream bank stabilization. When there are floods, the MCC is often on the scene quickly and doing that work. And the people that do that work, I think Representative Acom is one who did that work, get a career in outdoor work. There's a lot in this bill, so I'm shocked that people would vote against it. It's surprising. You have the legacy components, you have the parks, and it seems that the reason why there may not be people voting for this is process. So because of the recovery we are in, that strong Biden recovery that's helping out our economy, that strong Biden recovery that's helping out our economy and putting money in our treasury, keep laughing, putting money in our treasury, that money that's there, we can wait a year, have it vetted by stakeholders, or we can use the process we have with our election certificates to make those investments right now. Whether we're looking at PFAS, microplastics, peat, neonicotinoids in water, all of those issues related to clean water. We all need clean water, and I'd ask for a yes vote for this bill.
I recognize the member from Candy Ojai, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Standing in the proper chair today, or right now. So I have a question for the author. Actually, a couple questions, but I'll one step at a time. But I'm wondering if he'll yield for my question.
He will yield, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Lillie, under the Outdoor Heritage Fund Article 1, it's a subdivision 2 prairies, and I'm actually reading from Minnesota House Research, so I'm using their language, not what's written in the bill. It's easier to find this here, but it says $35 million towards various projects of restoring, enhancing, and protecting the state's prairies. And so my first question on that is there, with outdoor heritage or with the DNR or somewhere, is there a master plan for this prairie restoration?
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Miller, I did not serve on Lessard Sam's this session, but I am familiar with the process and how these projects are selected. And they're very strategic as far as they're not just purchasing a land. They're trying to link it with other projects, maybe a clean water project that's going on or other projects. So there is a plan to try to protect a lot of this, the prairie projects. My understanding of we've been lucky at some of the land that's not been under till yet in Minnesota. So it's some of the less desirable side pieces maybe off of a wetland and some of those, and trying to put those pieces together. So I don't know how much of an answer that is, but it's a start. Maybe I can do better in round 2.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's actually a great answer. It was so good you actually answered question number 2. But I do have question number 3 if the author will continue to yield.
He will yield, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Lillie, I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm going to ask. As part of this plan that they have, Lessard Sams or whomever, do they have anything that would be an aftercare plan? And I guess this part B to this question is, does any of this money go towards that aftercare plan? So once they create Prairie, what happens after that?
Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Miller. There is a plan. Some of them turn into their possession of the DNR perhaps as a wildlife management area or SNAs and various outdoor properties under the umbrella of the state of Minnesota, and so they're protected and also receiving a PILT or they're helping the local counties. But the plan is that they're stayed and that they're maintained. These things are not without maintenance. That's actually a really good question. They'll need burning. They'll need, continued maintenance to, maybe the rain's increasing, so the trout stream that you restored might need to be, redone. But it's quite, unfortunately, it's not a one and done thing on many of these projects. So thank you.
Representative Miller.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lillie. Well, I want to speak to an actual project that's in my district. And in my district along the Minnesota River Valley, which if you've never vacationed in a more beautiful place in Minnesota, yes, even more beautiful than up north, Representative Poston, the Minnesota River Valley is beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous, pristine, natural. The people that farm around it work well. I mean, it's kind of what we kind of hope to see in Minnesota. But Lacapara Lake, which is a portion of that, it opens up into a lake. Over the last couple of years, there are trees that, think of imagining being on a lake and you look up and see the bluffs covered in trees. Many of the lakes we have look just like that, okay? You sit in your boat on the water, you look up and you see you see the eagles, you see the different birds, you're catching your fish, you look up on the land, see this beautiful landscape. Well, in Lacapara Lake, they're basically clear-cutting trees. And the people out there have been asking me for their help. They don't understand why when they talk to the DNR. I don't know about in parts of your state, but in my state, if you ask the DNR questions, you're pretty much guaranteed to not get any answers, or get the runaround, or be told something that is not true. Which really frustrates me. I've been here 8 years, and I've been patient with the DNR. For another time, maybe another bill, we'll talk more about that. But they have not been helpful. But around Lacapara Lake, we finally got together a meeting, met out at the Watson Hunting Club, got some people from the DNR on, and I started asking the same questions that the locals were asking about this project that weren't getting answers. Probably because I'm a state representative, I get a little bit more direct. And they said, well, Representative Miller, the state of Minnesota is suffering from not enough prairie land. We have to cut down these trees, and we're talking hundreds, if not probably 2,000 to 3,000 acres of trees that are being systematically cut down so that we can, quote unquote, restore this prairie land that they're talking about. Well, there's a little bit of a problem because the rest of the story is two things. First of all, for those as old as me, you remember the cartoon, The Lorax, right? And as they're cutting down the trucula trees, you just see this vast landscape of stumps. That's what it looks like around Lacapara Lake right now, and it's growing every single day. They're just cutting down the tree, dragging off the main part of the tree, and leaving stumps behind. They keep saying they're going to come behind and clear this up. That doesn't sound like prairie land to me. Another thing that doesn't sound like prairie land to me is they aren't doing any follow-up care for this pristine land they're talking about. Now, those of us in western Minnesota, what happens when you cut out a bunch of trees and leave it go? Buckthorn. Is buckthorn prairie? Maybe that's technically some definition of prairie, but I guarantee you it's not the pristine prairie that we're talking about. We have acres upon acres upon acres that I'm sure there's projects just like this. This is probably helping fund that project around Lacapara Lake. The people are saying, why are we doing this? And we're being told it's because it's to return it to pristine prairie land, which it was not. I think technically someone told me in DNR it was prairie land like 200 or 300 years ago, they think. Okay? They think. They can't even prove that. But members, if we're going to be spending this sort of money to do these things, whether we agree or not on prairie land, I think we all can agree that if we're going to restore prairie land, or we're going to create prairie land in this case, that we actually create prairie land. More frustrating, and I'm just taking this for my moment, Mr. Speaker, the fundamental problem that I have with bills like this, when Representative Hansen says, how can you not get behind this? The voters voted for this. There is no one in my district that voted for what's happening around Lacapara Lake. There is nobody. So if we are going to do something that's at the heart and the interest of what the people want, it would at least lead me to conclude that we're going to do projects that the people in that area would support and want, and no one in that area supports it. If we're going to be spending $35 million on whatever it means to restore prairie land, whether we agree with that premise or not, should we not at least restore prairie land? And should we not bring it back to what the people's interests are, as Representative Hansen said, do the people's wishes? I think this is a lot of waste of money. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I will tell you that the DNR is not helpful in any of this stuff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was hoping you would call on me next because I can tell you that we do have a Prairie Plan. I checked, it's about 71 pages, so probably pretty hard to read really quickly right now, but I encourage you to look it up. It is really well thought out, was updated in 2018, and I'm sure all those definitions and questions that you just asked can be found there. As well, I want to point members to, if you go to the Outdoor Heritage Council website, so it's LSOHC, if you Google that, there's actually a very extensive map that's really cool that you can look up. You can even pull things up by your House district, by Senate district, city, county, what kind of project. And as every project that's been funded throughout our state on that map, you can click on it, it can give you more information, and it's a really great resource for the public to know how these dollars are being spent. I would also say our Outdoor Heritage Council staff are really great. And if you have questions about something that's going on with one of these projects, if you're questioning something, I encourage you to reach out to them. And it is literally their job to answer questions about these projects and to continue to monitor how these things are going. So those were just my quick responses that hopefully are helpful for you, Representative Miller. So I've served on the Outdoor Heritage Council for several years. I was the one who did. So when you look at the schedule of what we do on the Outdoor Heritage Council, and it says we score projects. So it's those big binders. I was surprised Representative Lillie didn't bring one today. But this big binders of projects that we read through and score, and it really is a lot of work. We really are getting deep in the weeds in our conversations about the relative benefits of a project, if there's something that might need to be changed to make it better. Because the reality is that the voters of Minnesota have spoken, and they do want us to be spending these dollars. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Will not surprise you that I'm going to talk about the Constitution right now, and specifically what the legacy amendment says about the outdoor heritage funds is that we are, so here's the key words, restore, protect, and enhance our wetlands, prairies, forests, and habitat for fish, game, and wildlife. And that "and wildlife" is really important because this is a bill that's not just for people who hunt and fish. I am one of those people, but there are many people who don't, and they still will benefit greatly from the projects that are in this bill. And a lot of those are prairie projects. Prairies are also one of the greatest ways that we can address our climate problems. The carbon sequestration that happens in prairies is really incredible. If you've seen one of those pictures of how our native plants, the roots go deep down into the soil, it really is incredible what these plants do for all of us and our climate. And so it's pretty nerdy. It was very enjoyable, but I was able to, at the beginning of this year, pass the torch to Representative Eklund. So he'll be reviewing that next big binder. He's been on LCCMR, so I think he knew what he was getting into, but happy to pass the torch to him. I also wanted to point out that of the people who voted for this amendment, of the Minnesotans, of our constituents who voted for this amendment, 59% of those who voted in favor of this amendment, and that was a difference of almost, so 493,506 people voted in favor, so almost 500,000 people more in favor than opposed to this amendment. So I think that's more than just a small amount of people. I think we have resounding evidence in a constitutional amendment that the voters, that Minnesotans want us to be spending these dollars, and that's what we do with this bill. It's really one of the coolest things about Outdoor Heritage Council is that we get to, we have a bill every year, and that's the norm, and that's really good because we can get these dollars out into the community. We can work on these projects. We can hopefully restore and protect these things before they're damaged, before they're polluted. And for those of you who like jobs, there are also a lot of jobs. These are really jobs bills as well. The folks that do the work of doing this restoration, doing these habitat projects, it's a lot of boots on the ground, and it's a lot of money going into that as well throughout our state. Two more things I wanted to touch on. Often folks talk about the amount of money that's spent in the metro versus rural Minnesota, and I just want to point out that when we're talking about the Outdoor Heritage Council, what is considered the metro is almost the full 11-county metro, so I don't know how many of you are in Sherburne County, Isani County, McLeod County. You really get pretty far away from Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so I just want to make sure that when folks think about this and look at the numbers, that they maybe look at that map of what's considered the metro, so that you're not sort of led astray by that terminology, because it doesn't just mean the urban core, it means a pretty large area, and it's actually based on the habitat itself. So those maps don't follow county lines because Mother Nature doesn't care about county lines. Finally, for the public's benefit, the application process is open right now, and one of the more negative things, one of the things I think we could do better on the Outdoor Heritage Council is to reach more organizations and more people. It tends to be the same groups applying again and again. It's not that they don't do good work, but this money belongs to everybody and belongs to our entire state. And so I do want to encourage, if there are organizations, nonprofits, local governments, Girl Scout troops, whatever it is, if there's a project that fits within what we're trying to do with restore, protecting, and enhancing wetlands, prairies, forests, and habitat, you should be applying, and those staff can also be helpful in making sure that you're figuring out how to do that application process. We don't want that to be a barrier to getting these dollars out in an equitable way. So again, it's a very good bill, lots of projects. A lot of this information is online if you want to see pictures. Nothing we say on the House floor will ever do justice to these projects and how beautiful they are and how great it is to see a restored prairie with bison on it, or restored lakes and wetlands. It really is a very cool thing, and for those of us who hunt and fish, we've probably have benefited from that as well. Happy to answer questions either online or offline if members have questions about these projects. I was proud to be a part of this process, and hope that members can support the bill. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Becker-Finn, I don't know where the spin on the percent of people who voted for this amendment came from. The manipulation of of numbers can give you different outcomes, but the reality is, and my recollection matches what is on the Secretary of State's website, 55.99% voted for the amendment according to, and that number, Representative Becker-Finn, is according to the Constitution of our state, and that's how it's calculated. We can manipulate the numbers in different ways in order to provide a percentage that represents something else, but the amendment passed with less than 56% of the vote, and that's fact. Members, I struggle, as many other members do here, with the amount of land that we continue to buy in this bill every year. And I'm learning more as I read, every year I read this bill, I learn more about our approach to this and how it interfaces with decisions that are made by our state agencies that are taking this money and deploying it to do things according to the bill and what is eventually law, and our constituents in their interface with it, which Representative Miller was talking about earlier, and I think is very important for us to consider, not only during this bill and the discussion today, but as we move forward in this process, realizing we have to do this again until 2034. I'm curious, in the past, this bill has purchased somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 acres of farmland throughout our state. I'm curious if the author would yield, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lillie, will you yield to a question? He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Representative Lillie, how many acres of land does this buy in fee, and then how many acres does it acquire an easement?
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Senator Drazkowski. So, oh, sorry. Representative Drazkowski. That actually, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. So we, in this bill that's before you today, there's 5,500 acres with PILT and 2,858 acres without PILT. Is that, do you want me to add it up? I don't know if it's a phone call. 8,300 acres, sir.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Lillie. It sounds like that's the fee title number. I also asked if there's the amount in easement, Representative Lillie, if you'd yield again, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Drazkowski. So the kind of the rundown then is there's $3,500. I'll just kind of tell them all. 3,500 acres that are being restored. Protected in fee with PILT is 5,500 acres. Protected in fee without PILT, 2,800. Protected in easements, 18,000 acres. And in acres that are enhanced are 50,000 acres. I didn't give you the exact numbers, but 50,578.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Lillie. That is helpful. So we've got about 8,400 acres that this bill buys from private sources and turns into some sort of public land in fee title, and another 18,000 that is locked up in permanent easements. I assume they're all permanent, Mr. Chair, and so that's a larger number than I've seen for the easement number in the past. That thing is inflated immensely. But the reality is, I'm waiting for Representative Green to give us the update on the number of acres. I used to track a spreadsheet on that. I'd like to pull that out again. Maybe next year, Representative Lillie will pull that out. But every year it seems to be give or take 10,000 acres of land that this bill takes out of the private sector and puts into the huge amount of public land that we have in this state. It's a huge amount of public land. And we also have another 18,000 acres in easements that this essentially does the same thing to, because a large use of the land is actually taken with that easement purchase. So I struggle with that. We're continuing to build up the cachet of land of the public sector, and I go back to the 2012 or 2013 legislative audit report, Representative Lillie, or 2014, that pointed out very clearly back then we had more public land in our state than we can afford to properly care for. We aren't taking care of the noxious weeds on state-owned land that we're supposed to. You know, government's supposed to do that, just like private citizens are supposed to do according to the law. We don't have the ability to do it. We just continue to overrun our skis. We continue to outrun our headlights. And that brings me, Mr. Speaker and members, to the next point. I was reading the bill and talking to legacy staff, and they were very helpful to me. And I went back and also looked at the bill from 2010. Representative Murphy was chair of the committee then. It was her bill in 2010, the legacy bill. And it did have the same language. The language that came to my attention, members, if you read the bill, on those provisions in the bill that purchase land, now this is the language that appears in virtually every one of them. Maybe not every one, but as far as I can tell, every one of them. The language is this, and I'm going to read it to you. You can read it in the bill too. It says a list of proposed acquisitions must be included as part of the required accomplishment plan. So now on face value, members, you look at that and you say, well, what does that mean? A list of proposed acquisitions must be included as part of the required accomplishment plan. So this gets down, members, to the fundamental of how the decision that we are engaged in here today interfaces with eventually the public agency or agencies that are charged in the bill and eventually the law with carrying out the law and taking the millions of dollars, the hundreds of millions of dollars, and many of them buying the land or acquiring permanent easements with the land in each, well, not each and every one of our districts, in many of our districts throughout the state. And so I talked to staff about it and it verified kind of what I thought I understood about it, and that is when these proposals come forward to the legacy, to the Outdoor Heritage Committee, and they're having their discussions, they don't have a full idea of which lands they're going to buy. They may not even have a partial idea of exactly what lands they're going to buy. They know which geographic area of the state they're going to target. They've talked to the different land grabbing organizations that they're going to dance with in the carrying out of this proposal or these proposals that are coming forward. But they don't know exactly where they're going to buy the land. They don't know which parcels. So these proposals come forward. They're part of the outdoor heritage process. And they kind of have an idea of, well, we want to go into southeast Minnesota. Members, I'm going to look at page 12 of the bill. Southeast Minnesota Protection and Restoration, Phase 10, okay? So members, this bill takes $5.4 million of this constitutionally required money that we have to spend on something to protect, restore, and enhance, which we struggle and sometimes argue around those meanings and whether or not buying land truly protects land. Some of us here believe that government can only protect land, and others of us believe that government does a terrible job of protecting land, and it actually is private people that can do the better job of protecting the land in the state of Minnesota. But they come forward with an idea of, a general idea of which lands or which area they're looking for. They write it into the proposal, and then it comes before us eventually with this language. It says, a list of proposed acquisitions must be included as part of the required accomplishment plan. Okay, southeast Minnesota, that's in here. $5.4 million is going to be spent, most of it, almost all of it, to buy land in southeast Minnesota. much of which is my district, members. And I will tell you, members, that the people in my district don't have an idea not only that this is going on here, they don't have any idea where this land is coming, where it's going to be purchased, and what its meaning is to them. Their property taxes, as was pointed out very clearly by a member earlier, and their property taxes are going up in their township, and they don't even know it yet. And so that discussion has not even happened to this point today, because we have this language in the bill that says they can come back and report to the Legacy Committee after this bill is passed into law and this body and the other body and the governor make the decision. After that's all done, the proposee or proposer can go and have the discussion with the Lessard Outdoor Heritage Committee and say, now, after we have the money and it's been passed into law, now these are the pieces of land we're going to buy in Wabasha County. Now these are the pieces of land we're going to buy in Goodhue County. Now these are the pieces of land we're going to buy in Winona County. And it's then that the decision and the understanding locally ever starts to happen among the local people on what the impact of this bill that we passed into law, not in the future 5 or 10 months when this discussion happens locally, but today it wasn't discussed. They didn't know what was going on today. Members, we are here as a constitutional republic, as the legislature, as a Minnesota House of Representatives, to represent the people of our district who don't even know yet that this implication is going to happen next to them or what it means to them. Members, there's no hearing in our district about this land purchase or what it's going to mean to property taxes for the people that live next to that land. There's no opportunity, Representative Lillie, for them to even have the discussion. There's no hearing. Government comes in then and enacts this, which we as legislators don't know which parcels it's going to impact or which townships or which property values it's going to impact. We don't know that here today as we make that decision with the bill here in front of us today. We do not know, because the language, members, in the bill says a list of proposed acquisitions must be included as part of the required accomplishment plan. And members, that happens in the future after this bill is passed, after the appropriation is made, and it is then, members, that the realization, Mr. Speaker and members, will actually settle upon the people of our districts that this bill will impact. Members, I implore you, and especially those of you that serve on the Legacy Committee, to consider this as we move forward in the future and continue in our endeavor to enact the constitutional provisions around this discussion today. We are overrunning our headlights to spend this money in such a manner and so fast because it's so much money, and we're overrunning our headlights and we're running over our constituents, and we don't even know that we did it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Monoman, Representative Green. I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we've had a nice discussion today. I guess I'm going to try and frame it as a nice discussion today on the language in the debate. And just going to address a couple of comments, a couple of statements that were made. And I'm going to thank my friends on the other side of the aisle for kind of walking us through some of the projects in the bill and highlighting them. That's very nice to bring us up to speed. But I think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. And I just want to mention that. We heard about provisions in the bill that'll work on protecting Minnesotans from lead. That's not an issue. We agree. We heard about provisions that would fund trails, that would work on getting lead out of some of the tackle and some of the other places that are harming waterfowl. There's a lot of agreement on these things. Republicans will not be voting red, Representative Hansen, because of things like that. Representative Hansen and others, we will be voting red because of examples like what Representative Drazkowski just brought up. We'll be voting red because of suddenly, in the dark of night, $47 million in new spending just landing in this bill, no recommendations from the Clean Water Council. What's the rush? We're voting no because we have great amendments like Representative Green brought that would have provided some accountability that Democrats rejected. Why? Those are the reasons that, unfortunately, Republicans, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but many of us are going to have to hope that this bill comes back better. To Representative Drazkowski's point, I'm going to further elaborate on some of the problems that are there in the land buying, which is cumulatively, if I did the math correctly, over 13 square miles taken out of the private sector and purchased by the government in Minnesota. So if, and this is my opinion, maybe I'm mistaken, but if the state of Minnesota walks into a yard and says, hey, I'd like to buy your land, most reactions, I think, would be somewhat negative. And Representative Drazkowski, I think what is a bit of a misnomer, a misunderstanding, is like, say, for example, when some great organizations, which I like and support and I'm a member of, I'm just going to use, for example, Ducks Unlimited, comes in and says, hey, we'd like to acquire a property. I think the people of Minnesota involved in that situation think that Ducks Unlimited retains the property. I'm just using that for an example. When in fact, that non-government organization is just going to, over a period of time, turn it right back over to the state of Minnesota, to DNR. And to Representative Miller's point, he's not on the, there you are. You switched desks. Yeah. To Representative Miller's point, people's expectations were what was the issue with the prairie discussion. We're just going to simply buy land and then a prairie doesn't magically appear. It takes work. And when those expectations aren't met, I think it's fair for the constituents in Representative Miller's district to say, hey, wait a minute. Why aren't those expectations being met? What happened here? Back to Representative Green's amendments. We need accountability. We need a cost-benefit analysis. We want to know that Minnesotans' dollars are being spent wisely. That whatever the promises that were made by the non-government organization in that acquisition, whatever promises those were, they need to be kept. So, you know, this bill is going to come back, and it's going to have likely all of those things that were mentioned by my friends on the other side of the aisle, the great things that we're touting today on the House floor. But I think it's probably going to be missing some of the clunkers. And you're likely going to see a lot of yes votes that you're not going to see today. And so I look forward to that. I hope that the conference committee's work is productive and that we can come back and we can support language together that we can't support today.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to go on for a long time today, but most of my points have been talked about. But I do have to hit on some things. And so I'm just going to get right into them without a lot of explanation. First, I'm going to address a couple of issues. And the one thing that that I'll talk about that bothers me a lot whenever these things are talked about or even put into print. It talks about 8,000 acres of land protected. Protected from who? Private citizens? Do you know that most of the land, and I say that comfortably, that goes in here that ends up in the hands of the state or the federal government never gets touched again? We talked a little bit about my amendment in the Wild Rice Watershed Board. Just for your information, there was some land that was acquired in that area a few years ago, and it was turned over to the federal government. And it's a swamp, so you might think that's fine, but through that swamp was an existing ditch where the water drained the land naturally. It wasn't put there by men, it was there. Well, through the years, sediment fills the ditches in. The federal government, because land was purchased by maybe Ducks Unlimited, maybe Pheasants Forever, I don't know, some other money laundering group, and they turned it over to the federal government, and they refused to let them clean the ditch. So now the water's backed up. They need to have that ditch cleaned. On the bottom end of that ditch is also a culvert, and it's under the charge of the DNR. And the DNR won't let them clean the culvert. So the water's backing up. The solution now is the project that we talked about earlier, Goose Prairie Marsh. They're going to confiscate someone else's land right next to the existing federal land, dig a sister ditch right next to the ditch that's on the federal land, put in a 50-foot buffer on either side of that, and then allow the farmer not to spray. He's just lost 60 acres. It's gone. And for what? Because somewhere along the line, we weren't watching. And somebody came in and got taxpayer dollars for a wonderful project, and they turned it over to a federal agency, and we're all paying the price, and landowners are paying the price. This is what I mean when I say these projects are not even close to being vetted. Not even close. You vote for these bills, you never look in this book. Did you know that a whole bunch of these properties that are in these bills are farmed or grazed? Because that's the best management practices for some of these prairies and some of these other lands. So they'll take it away from private citizens who are making their property tax payments, raising their families, and they'll squeeze out the private sector. And then if they do have the money, they'll go in and either burn it, graze it, or farm it. That's what they do, because that is the best management for this property. And Representative Heinzman said, prairies don't just develop by their own. They grew up with all kinds of different invasive weeds, whatever you want to call it, and they're not healthy unless you pour a ton of money into them. I've been asking for years, literally years. I've been here for 10 years. I've been on the Legacy Committee for 10 years. I've been in Environment for 10 years. And I've watched, and Legacy is not the only fund that buys land, by the way. We have a lot of money going into land acquisitions. And my question that has never been answered by anyone is, what's the goal? How much is enough? At what point do we say, now that a third of our state is in some kind of public ownership, do we say, maybe we need to keep some of this in private ownership? Do you want it all? Well, there's a book came out in November 2018, Wildlife Management Area and Aquatic Management Acquisition. And it gives you some clue. I just flipped open here. Page 29. If you live in or around Aiken, Deer River, Pequot Lakes, Walker, Bemidji, Black Duck, Park Rapids, or Wadena, they're looking to own, state is looking to purchase, protect 75% of your property. So I hope that when you go home and as we're hearing now that people are looking at their property tax statements and having to go get heart medicine because that's how much our land values are going up. This is going to add to that exponentially. It's just going to keep increasing. The other thing you don't see in here is that every year our counties lose more land to property tax forfeiture. So people just simply can't keep up. Our senior citizens on fixed incomes constantly seeing their land go to tax forfeiture. When it does, guess who gets it? State of Minnesota. And if it's touching water, they'll tell the county whether or not they can do anything with that land or not. I'm not going to go on too much longer, but I did want to touch on just a couple of things in the bill. Going through the projects, they changed the bill a little on me from when I marked up my bill, so I'll try to get you close. We'll just start right at the beginning. On page 2, line 2 and down, the first project, Pheasants Forever. I don't think right now Pheasants Forever owns any property in Minnesota. Yeah, I could be wrong. If they do, it'll only be for a short time that they do. Like I said, they launder the money. They'll come and they'll get the money, they'll purchase the land, and they'll turn it back over to either the federal government or the state of Minnesota. That's what they do. So there's no management through these non-government entities. Simply, we'll go in. I don't even know why they do it. The DNR could do it. They could come and get the money and buy the land, but they go through these front groups to do it. And that in itself is kind of disturbing. It's like they want to try to fool you. Next project is a Bowser project. This is a little bit further in, I think, but it's, actually it's the second one. 880 acres, permanent easement. We talked about easements. I've got people coming into my office and saying, I want my property taxes reduced because my land's in a permanent easement. I can't use it anymore, and it's not worth as much if I'm going to go to sell it. And my answer is, that's too bad. You went and put it in a permanent easement, then now you're just going to have to deal with it. But in this project, 880 acres in permanent easement, and there is no idea where it is. I guess it's in one of the 87 counties in Minnesota, or maybe many of them. So when you talk about vetting projects, it just does not add up. These projects are not vetted. They come before you and they say, we're going to do these wonderful things. Where are they? Well, we don't know. But we want the money, and I guess the answer is, well, here you go. Have at her. Next project, half state, half federal, Pheasants Forever. Some of the land's going to each. Federal lands we don't get pilt on, even though pilt bothers me too, because the counties need it if you're going to take the land away. But all you're doing is paying property tax with some other tax. There's no more revenue generated on that land. You know, I could go on, and I think people are probably done listening now anyway. I guess I'll just keep bringing this back for as long as I'm here. Probably won't be too much longer, but maybe I'll start my own nonprofit. And I used to joke with my wife. I said, I'm going to go apply for a grant, and it's going to be a grant to do a study on the adverse effects of grants. She thought it was a good idea, but I never did it. But anyway, I just want you to, whether you vote for this bill or not, this is a lot of money. And it's doing devastating things. You can pick out the good things. You can pick out the good things in any bill. But you have to start looking at maybe some of the adverse effects of these things. Know the projects. At least look through and pick 3 and find out at least what 3 of them are doing. Because I'll bet you most of you don't even have a clue what they are. Somebody tells you they're wonderful, they're buying land, oh, great deal, let's do that. So anyway, I won't be supporting the bill. I do also have a problem with the clean water funds that are in here. You know, I don't have a problem with the legislature not going to the Clean Water Council, because I've said that for years. It's not the Clean Waters Council to pick these projects, it's ours. But the projects in this bill under the Clean Water Fund, it looks to me like somebody just took a bunch of darts and threw them at a board, and they didn't. The projects are not vetted in there. $2 million for this, $2 million for this, $2 million for this, whatever it is. What are you going to do with the projects? Well, we don't know. We'll just throw it out there and see where they land. So it's just not put together the way I like it. I won't be voting for it, and I encourage a no vote on the bill. Thanks.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Lillie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for this discussion this afternoon. It's been a bit of a journey, but I think it's a good discussion. I think it's good to hear what's going on. The legacy amendment is really a blessing for our state, and that's kind of the bottom line for me, and I think should be for all of us. I think you can look at the bill and find so many good things in all of your districts, from libraries to parks to trails to some of these purchases that are for all of us to be able to hunt and fish and cleaning up our habitat. I'm just, you know, it'd be easy to, I kind of kept one of these lists I learned from some of the senior members. They keep like a list of all the stuff. I'm probably not going to go through all that because that could really be fun, I guess, for you guys. No. You know, I really respect Representative Green a lot. He's been the GOP lead on this committee, and it's clear that he's dug in. And we've seen this, we're in our 14th year of this amendment. And to ask questions of where this is going and what we're doing with these funds, there's really nothing wrong with that. Because this is for all of us. This is for the state of Minnesota. And I personally see a lot of positives. And, you know, just the other day I was driving through West St. Paul, and I take a left. I'd never been, well, not never been on this road, but I hadn't taken this route for a long time. And all of a sudden, this little random intersection, there's a little sculpture. And, you know, it kind of flips you a switch of, you know, it kind of knocks you out of it's, you know, funded by the arts folks. And it just kind of flips your switch of what, you know, you're thinking about at the time you're in rush hour, and you just kind of makes you think a little differently. So that's kind of, you know, that's some of the accountability things are hard to measure. What's that worth to drive by restored prairie and see a bird flying, or maybe a butterfly? I'm sorry I don't know why that say the word butterfly, so I get a lot of smirks there. But, but you know, just to see these things are really great for our state. And, you know, we need to check it, though, too, at times to make sure that we're not going too far and those sort of things. I really want to thank our staff. You know, we're so blessed with nonpartisan staff, Janelle Taylor and Mary Mullen and Brad Hagemeyer and Helen Roberts. I'm kind of jealous. I mean, I feel sorry for the rest of you because we've got the best. And I don't know how you guys get your work done, but we have the best. And then in our office, you know, Sam's really helped, and then Molly with research, and your team, Amy Zipko up there, and she actually is a great help, and Mike Molzon. But my committee, I mentioned Steve, Representative Green has done a good job bookending kind of my zest, and what's the word you wanted me to use? Neat. I got yelled at. I haven't used it yet, so this is really a neat bill, so there it is. But my vice chair, Representative Jordan, you heard her today. I thought she did a great job and continues to do a good job. I'm kind of have two former chairs on there, so it's always a little scary. I've got Representative Erdahl here, and I have a deep amount of respect. That's why I picked this chair on the floor, to be close to my the ball of twine, which I hear he's losing in redistricting. So I don't know what he's going to talk about. Corn cobs. And then Chair Murphy, also on the committee, has done a great job, and one of the first chairs of Legacy. Erdal's been teasing me today because he said I'm not getting the votes of Gunther or him or Mary, so he said I'm in trouble. That may be the case. Representative Hazan, thank you for your service on the committee. Representative Bowe here with his fancy yellow tie, and Representative Christensen and Representative Wozliak, thank you. And certainly Mr. Anderson, thank you for being on the committee and doing a good job. And Representative Acomb, I hope I didn't miss anybody because I missed Mary in the last time. I think we're good. But again, thank you for hearing this today. You know, we're so blessed as a state to have this doing good work. And if again, I don't speak against the accountability things, and that's most of what we spent our session working on, is checking in to make sure that these funds are doing good work, because I think that's important that we can renew this. And there are goals that we're trying to do so that our lakes are fishable and swimmable and drinkable, that our habitats are robust and strong. And, you know, Minnesota is ultimately a great place to live with these things, and our great arts community and our parks and trails. But with that, I'd appreciate it if you'd consider voting green today. So thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids. Houseman.
Houseman, aye.
Houseman, aye. McDonald.
Davids, no.
McDonald.
Davids, no. McDonald, no. Davids, no.
McDonald, no. Mortensen.
Mortensen, no.
Mortensen, no. Thompson. Thompson. Davids.
Davids, no.
Davids, no. Thompson. Thompson.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 62 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. I recognize the member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Winkler.
Mr. Speaker, members, we are going to recess. DFL members, we will provide you a 30-minute notice before we will caucus. The caucus will be in room 120, so we're going to caucus this evening. and we'll provide 30 minutes notice before we do so. And then we will plan to come back at some point this evening, and we will give the House 30 minutes notice before we reconvene.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Isanti, the Minority Leader, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, Republican members. We will give you a 30-second notice for caucus, and that notice is right now. So we're going to go immediately after the gavel here into caucus downstairs. Thank you.
Any further announcements? The member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Winkler.
Mr. Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the chair.
Representative Winkler moves a recess to the call of the chair. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no.
No!
The motion prevails and the House stands in recess.